YouTubeaya Bhagavad Katha Sangaya Nama. Greetings. Welcome back to Bhagavatam. It's been a while. I think we skipped a week. So let's backtrack. We're in the 5th division of Bhagavatam. In the 4th division, we heard all the things associated with children of Manu and Shatarupa, except for the children of their oldest son, Priyavrata. The beginning of Canto 5 is explained why we didn't hear about the children of the oldest son, because he didn't have children for a very long time. And the reason for that is that he didn't do anything really. He just went to the forest to study with Narada and was trying to practice the sadhana that Narada was teaching. But after his younger brother's lineage had run its course, ending with the Prachetas giving birth to the reincarnation of Daksha, Daksha was not fit to rule the world because he had to do sadhana himself to restore his power because of his aparad to Shiva. So because of that, the only person who was alive that was fit to rule the world was Priyavrata. So Brahma and Manu interrupted his meditations and forced him basically to rule the world. Then, as a ruler, he did something very amazing, which is what we heard about the last time we spoke. He didn't like the unevenness of climate that the sun causes because of its wandering north and south. As you know, it wanders north and south. It goes from solstice to solstice. So he wanted to offset that. So I'm not quite sure how to understand this. Maybe previous to Priyavrata, the sun wandered much further north and south. Or maybe when he relinquished his kingdom, he also, that modifying effect that he had also relinquished and it went back to normal, which is what it is today. I don't know. But what he did to offset the sun's wandering north and south was to create artificial suns, 7 of them, at different altitudes from the ecliptic. And they counteracted the effect of when the sun would be weak in one area, the alternate sun would be strong in that area. So the result, though, is that these 7 artificial suns created impressions into space, and that caused space to coagulate into 7 distinct realms called islands, with these vast spaces in between them called oceans. We talked about the very interesting correlation between that and modern cosmology. That was in our last stream. We left off with it saying he at one point put his sons, because he actually had 9 of them, maybe 10. He actually had 10 sons, but 3 of them went off to do sadhana. So he had 7 kids, and it wound up making 7 divisions in the world. He put his 7 sons in charge of the 7 divisions. And then he had 1 daughter. So we'll start off today with it saying what he did about the what happened with his daughter. And then it will wrap up that tale by saying, you think this is impossible? It's not impossible. All right? And then it's going to, after it wraps up that tale, then it's going to wrap up Priyavrata's whole life. And then that will be the end of the 1st chapter of the 5th canto. The 2nd chapter is going to talk about his oldest son, Agnidra. And then who did he marry, and then what kids did they have. All right? So let's go see what it says. Where should we start? Where should we start? Finishing up that tale. Duhitaram Urjaswati Nama Shashane Prachad Yasyam Asit Devyani Nama Kavyasuta. His daughter Urjaswati married Ushana, and together they produced a talented daughter named Devyani. Now, you will hear more about Devyani. You'll hear more probably about Urjaswati. And who is this Ushana? There's a hint in the verse about who Ushana is, because the word which means talented daughter also means daughter of Venus. Because Venus is sometimes named Kavi, which means expert. And so, since it's the daughter of Ushana, you can infer that Ushana is Kavi, or Shukracharya, or Venus. So that's who she married. Urjaswati married Ushana, and then they had a daughter named Devyani. And there's no more information about that, but I bet you later on you'll hear more about this. Okay, then the next verse is pretty important. Naivam vida purushakara urukramasya pumsang tat angri rajasa chita sat gunanam chitram vidura vigata sakrit adadita yanama deya madunasa jahati bandham. This type of power, what type of power? The power to offset the movement of the sun and create artificial suns, and then cause space to be modified and cause the realms to come into distinct being. That's a lot of power. Like, what is that? This type of power is not amazing for a person who has conquered the 6 perceptions by the dust of the feet of the super powerful Supreme. Anyone who applies himself to the name of that Supreme at once in the present life shuns all binding karmas, even if they have strayed very far. You see, this is a pretty famous statement, and it's pretty important. Let's just go over it for a second, go over the wording. Basically what he's saying is, what Priyavrata did is impossible unless you're God, or godlike, or a god. So the inference is that Priyavrata had the power of God. Why? So it says he has Purusha Kara. He had that incredible ability. Purusha means somebody who can control something, change it, use it. Purusha, the user of the city, is literally what it means. The user of the world is Purusha. Purusha Karya, the ability to dominate the world, change the world. Urukramasya, he gets that from Urukrama. Urukrama is what I translated as super powerful, supreme. Krama means to do. Urukrama means incredible deeds. Urukramasya pumsam, the super powerful person. Tadangri, the feet of the super powerful person. Rajasa. So the feet, the access point to a great being is their feet, because they're above you. And so the access point to the feet is the bottom of the feet, and what comes off the bottom of the feet is the dust. So that's the concept behind this dust of the feet thing. The dust of the feet of Urukrama is super powerful. It's the access point to Urukrama. If you have the dust of the feet, means if you submit yourself to Urukrama, through the submission you get very powerful. Some people who want power, their power will always be destroyed by somebody else more powerful. But people who don't want power, but who want love, they want to love. People who want to love, it's different from wanting love. People who want to love, they become very powerful, especially if they direct it to spiritual love. Because the act of submission as a lover to a powerful person empowers you. So what he's saying is, what Priyavrata did is impossible, except for Urukrama, God. But because Priyavrata was empowered by the dust of the feet of Urukrama. That's why he could do it. And the wording used also is interesting. Jitta Shad Gunanam, 6 gunas. Here it doesn't mean the 3 gunas. It means the 6 gunas. The 6 gunas is the colors, tastes, the smells, all the 6 perceptions. The 6th perception. This is the movie The Matrix really came close to illustrating a lot of these basic facts, and I think in many interviews, the Wachowski twins, admitted that they drew a lot from Buddhism and Eastern thought. But the concept, when you're believing that the thing that you're perceiving is real, then you're bound by the laws of the things that you're perceiving. But when you realize that the stuff that you're perceiving is just a perception, then you gain a lot of power over it. In the same way that lucid dreaming, you become very powerful when you're lucid dreaming. Lucid waking is basically what Priyavrata was. Due to his contact with Urukrama, the Supreme, then he's lucidly awake. And that gives incredible amount of power. That's why he could do these things. So that's the first half of the statement. This type of power is not amazing for a person who... Now, this is the danger of not looking. Okay. Danger of not looking at the text or anything, which I can do in Bhagavatam because you guys aren't really off con. So that's the first half of the statement. Naivam vidab purushakara urukramasya pungsanktar angri rajasajita shadgunanam. Second part. Chitram. That's actually not chitram. It's not amazing. Chitra nakshatra. Amazing. Fascinating. Not chitram vidura vigata sakrit adadita yanamadheyan adunasa jahati bandam. Right? So some people translate this as saying it's people who just say the name of Urukrama once, even if they are non-Vedic people, they will immediately become liberated. That's one way to understand what the words mean. But I translating it like this: anyone who applies themselves to the name of that Supreme at once in the present life shuns all binding karmas, even if they have strayed very far. So let me show you the words. Vidura vigata means somebody who has gone far away. So the meaning there is like what people would say, Mlechas, Yavanas, non-Vedic people who are very far away. But what it really means is people who have strayed very far from proper paths. That's what it really means. It doesn't mean foreigners. It means people who have strayed. Vigata. People who have strayed. People who have strayed. Sakrit. As soon as they do it, adadita, the pronunciation, yanama, of the name or names of that Urukrama. But it's namadeya. Deya means to apply. So it's not just like a casual recitation of the name, but somebody who comes to think this being Urukrama is important. I want to focus on that being and understand this being, and so therefore I want to contemplate the names, etc. of this being. That person is namadeyam. And that person, upon that happening, sakrit, upon having that attitude towards Urukrama, adhuna, in this very life, jahati bandam. Jahati doesn't mean they get freed from. Jahati means they free themselves from. They free themselves from banda, which means bondage, all binding karmas. So the reason why these two statements are together, it's saying Priyavrata was very powerful. He could do this stuff. It shouldn't be that amazing, because anybody who even starts the process of contemplation of Bhagavan becomes very liberated, very free in this world right away. So imagine Priyavrata, who did it for thousands of years with Narada as his guide. Of course, he became very, very liberated from any bandha, any limitations. You understand? Any questions? He's explaining how he got the power to do the crazy things that he did. The amazing thing, crazy in the sense of amazing. Any prashnas about this? It's very interesting because it's putting a different paradigm up. That it's not, but the quest for power doesn't really come to those who quest for it, because such persons don't deserve it. What does it mean to shun the binding karma? It means they give up the inauspicious activities, and it also means that they give up the things which cause them limitations. They give up submission to the things which cause their habits, etc., 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 that they can't break. $36. Okay, so that's the end of Priyavrata's tale, kind of. That's the end of this tale of him doing this stuff with the sun. Now, after this, it's said that he gave possession of this divided world to his sons. So now it's going to give more detail about that. He didn't do that until he retired. Yes, Samurai. But now he's going to explain that. Sa evam aparimitta parakrama. Ekadatu devarshi charananu shashananu patita guna visarga sangsargena navritam. Iva atmanam manyamana atmanirveda idam aha. He thus showed unparalleled power, but eventually reprimanded himself, saying, "Once upon a time, I studied at the feet of the sage of gods. But now, I have submerged myself into things created merely by perceptions, things that do not truly satisfy me." So after a while, he remember, when Brahma and Manu came to him to say, you need to stop meditating, we need you to take over the world, he said, I don't want to do that, I want to meditate, this is superior. They said, you need to do this, and Brahma convinced him why and explained why. So he did it wholeheartedly for some time. But after he had fulfilled that responsibility and produced children who could take over the world, then he said, that's enough of this. So that's what's going to be described now. Enough is enough of this. He's literally going to say, alam alam amusha, which means enough of this, enough of this. He's saying, once upon a time, I was doing something amazing. Now I'm doing something totally normal. Which he's thinking it's totally normal. He created 7 artificial suns. But basically, it's totally normal because it's just dealing with the world of perceptions, not of consciousness. And the interesting thing that he said is anirvritam. These things are endless. These things are unsatisfying. Even though I've made 7 suns, the climate is still not right. Even if the climate is right, something else will be wrong. Even if I do this and that, this other thing will happen. This is one of the problems of seeking happiness in perceptions. The perceptions are dependent upon external objects. And so the happiness becomes dependent on something. And so the satisfaction that comes from the perception is not always available. It's not always there. So then he says, aho, which is funny in Japan. In Japanese, aho is kind of the closest insult that they have to like English person. I don't even feel like saying it. Aho, but it sounds like aho in English. Not like that, aho. Aho asad vanushtitam yad abhiniveshito yam indriyayar avidyarachita vishama vishayandakupe tad alam alam mamusha vanitaya vinoda brigam mam dik dikiti garhayam chakara. Sanskrit is really funny. Alam alam dik dik aho. So many just words like basically they're translations of these words. He criticized himself. Alas, I live like a materialist. Asad vanishtitam. I live like a materialist, not like a spiritualist. So I seem obsessed with sensuality. Abhinivesh. I seem completely obsessed with materialistic things. I'm not really. This is not my heart. That's the problem, really. This is why there's a saying in Sanskrit. I can't remember the Sanskrit for it, unfortunately, but ignorance is bliss. That saying actually comes from Sanskrit. That there's two kinds of happy people in the world. A person who's totally ignorant and a person who's totally knowledgeable. But the people in between are unhappy. So what he's saying is, if I was a materialist, this would be fun, but I'm not a materialist, and this is getting on my nerves now. Alas, I live like a materialist, so I seem obsessed with sensuality. Now listen to his wording. Vishama. Shama means work, which means Vishama means stress. You have to work. Avidya rachita. I'm stressing out for things that are unreal. I stress out pursuing objects of perception, Vishaya. I stress out for the objects of perfection, Vishaya, which are just created by illusion and exist in Andakupe, exist in a well of blindness. Just think about that. Andakupa is, we live in Andakupa, a pitch black well. We don't know what the heck is going on outside the wall. We can't hear that far. We can't see that well. The whole world is black. Literally, the whole world is black. And there's just little dots of light around. That's Andakup. In this unknown, dangerous world, we're trying to find little things that we can perceive. And those things themselves are just flickers and reflections. Avidya rachita. And it takes Vishama, a lot of work, to find them and see them and experience them. Ao asadvanushtitam yad abhiniveshto ham. Indriyar avidya rachita vishama vishaya andakupe tat alam mamusha. Enough of that. Enough is enough. Alam, enough is enough. Ugh, dig. I behave like a pet of my lover. Vanita vinoda mrigam. Vinoda mriga is a pet, literally the beloved animal. Vanita, the lover or the wife. We become submitted to the thing that gives us pleasure. It's natural. You're subservient or dependent upon the thing which gives you pleasure. If your pleasure is on external people and objects and things, then you become the pet. You don't have independent dignity. So he's tired of that. Johnny asks if this is pretty good with the Matrix blue pill thing. I think it is in how you see that one guy. Remember, he said, I know it's the Matrix and I want to go back into it. I know it's illusion. I want to go back into it. It's like, if you're like, yes, I want to be an illusion, then you'll actually kind of be okay in the illusion. Paradevata prasadadika tatma pratyavagamarshena anupravrittebhya putrebhya imam yatadayam vibhajya bhuktabhogam cha mahishim mritikam iva saha mahavibhutam apahaya svayam nihta nirveda hridi grihita hari viharanubhavo Bhagavata naradasya padavim punar evanusasara. Having the favor of the paramount divinity, he realized what he should do. As if he had died, he lost all interest in everything he had enjoyed. He divided his kingdom and gave it as his inheritance to his son, placing his queen in their care as well. He ceased displaying all his great powers. His heart embraced the emotions of Hari's dalliances, and he once again fully applied himself to the path blessed Narada had shown him. Let's unpack this a little bit. So, Paradevata Prasada Adigata, because he had the prasada, the favor of Paradeva, the supreme divinity, he could now figure out what he's supposed to do, what he should do. So he not only figure out, but also do it. So he realized, look, I came and I got involved in this whole affair of running the world. But now it's over. It's done. My responsibility is fulfilled. So enough of this. I'm done with it. And so he took the attitude that I have died. I've died here. So there's echoes of this in modern culture, like you're dead to me, etc., etc., etc. Except in Vedic culture, it's I'm dead to the world. And this is the way that people are supposed to enter the fourth ashram, or even the third, which is the ashrams where we give up living in comfort. And it's to the extent that even in Indian law, I'm not sure if it's still, but the last time I heard about this, even in Indian law, a person who is entered into those ashrams, sannyas, they are not considered alive. So the law treats them as though they were dead. And so things like their inheritance and their will are take effect then, not after they die. So that's coming here from the way that Priyavrata did things. He said, I'm dead. So I'm not hanging out with my wife anymore. I'm dead. I'm not ruling the kingdom anymore. I'm dead. So what would happen if I was dead? Well, my sons would take care of my wife, and they would take over my kingdom. So that's what I'm going to give them. Dayam, yatad dayam, I'm giving my inheritance. Vibhajya bhukta bhogam, he took his whole kingdom and everything that he enjoyed and he divided it up and made sure everybody got the inheritance, and then he left like he was dead. Saha mahavibhutim, he also gave up his great powers. This is probably the most difficult thing to give up, because he was displaying great powers, creating suns, modifying the world itself. Yeah, it could be pretty interesting. I mean, people just even like playing Minecraft. Imagine if you could do it in the real world. You might not want to stop doing that, but he's like, enough of this. So he gave that up as well. And then his heart, which had previously been depressed, now became gripped by strong emotions. Anubhava. About Hari's vihara, dalliance, pastime, lila activities. And that was him again, punar evanusasara of Narada Padavim. Naradasya Padavim, the thing that he had learned from Narada, the path he had learned from Narada. So you get a hint of what path he learned from Narada. The path that he learned from Narada is to visualize the pastimes, the activities of the all-attractive. Visualize that with his meditation and his contemplation. So focus on that within himself. That's what he did. Having the favor of the paramount divinity, he realized what he should do. As if he had died, he lost all interest in everything he had enjoyed. He divided his kingdom and gave it as inheritance to his sons, placing his queen in their care as well. He ceased displaying all his great powers. His heart embraced the emotions of Hari's dalliance, and he once again fully applied himself to the path blessed Narada had shown him. Flatlander says, when you help improve the conditions of the temporary world, are you strengthening the bond to the temporary for others? No, what you're doing is doing your duty, which is the important part. That's the important part. Whether or not the world has peace or war is not the important part, because it constantly changes. But whether or not we try to be peaceful or allow ourselves to be warlike, that's the important part. The individuals who participate in creating the war and peace situations, those are the people who benefit or suffer. The world itself doesn't give a damn whether there's war or peace. The world is just atoms. So it's not for the condition of the world that we interact with the world and try to make the world better. It's for our condition. Because by being responsible and doing the things that we are supposed to do, doing the things that other people need us to do, we clean our heart. So that is the whole purpose, really, of the whole external world, is the chance to have some specific duties that will purify us. All right. there's 3 more verses. So now, who's telling the story? Maitreya? No, this is who's telling the story. I think we're all the way back up to Shukadev talking to Parikshit. We'll find out soon. There'll be a Uvacha statement somewhere. Anyway, the narrator, who I think is Shuka, now he finishes up his story of Priyavrata by quoting some famous verses about Priyavrata. He says, Tasya Hava Ete Shloka. About Priyavrata, there are these very famous shlokas, poems of glorification. And he gives 3 of them. Priyavrata Kritam Karma Kuno Kuryad Vineshwaram. Yo Nemi Nimnaira Acharoch Chayam Knan Sapta Varidam. What Priyavrata did, no one but God can do. A rose made by his wheels created 7 oceans that destroyed shadow. So you heard all about that. Priyavrata Kirtam Karma, the things that Priyavrata did, Kunokur Yad Vineshwaram. Nobody except Ishvara could do that. What's the implication? You may say the implication is that Priyavrata is Ishvara, Priyavrata is God. But you know that that's not the case, because Priyavrata is described as the Anuvrata, the Priyavrata, the devotee, the follower, the contemplator of God, the experiencer of God, not God. So what is it then? So this also I thought would be interesting to tell you about. You may have heard this concept before of Shakti Avesh Avatar. Let me just explain what that is, because that's what's going on with Priyavrata. An avatar is when a being who is not within the karmic creation, like Shiva, Vishnu, some form of Shiva, some form of Vishnu, comes into this karmic cause and effect world. That's what an avatar is. Priyavrata is not an avatar, but then how is it that he was able to do what only God could do? Which is what? Which is create the world. He really modified the world. So we heard why. He previously explained, because he was empowered by God. That's called Shakti Avesh. So sometimes the being, Shakti is a power. Power is not a freestanding entity. Power is something that comes from a power plant. Power comes from a being, a person, a thing. Things generate power. This is important to understand. Things generate power. Power doesn't generate things. Power can concurrently generate a thing, but its foundation is a being. So, if the avatar of Vishnu comes into the universe, then the power comes with them, of course, because the power is rooted in him. But that doesn't mean that the power can't come in on its own. So you might call it a Shakti avatar, but the Shakti doesn't just exist freestandingly, it exists in some being. So when Vishnu sends Shakti into the universe, or Shiva sends Shakti into the universe to get something accomplished, it resides in a person. And that person becomes the Avesh, the holder, he becomes enwrapped in the Shakti. That's why they're called Shakti Avesh avatar. Priyavrata is one such. Okay, next. Pu samsthanam kritam yena sarid giri vanadibi. This is interesting. Sima cha, Sima. We have a friend who comes on the stream sometimes named Sima. Sima cha bhuta nivrityai dvipe dvipe vibhagasha. He configured the world so that things like rivers, hills, and forests would form natural borders within each island to separate creatures so they could live peacefully. So if you were here 2 weeks ago when we talked a lot to clarify some of the misconceptions about the 7 islands, one of the misconceptions is that the 7 islands are the 7 continents on the face of the earth, when actually the 7 islands are the 7 planets, or that are reflections of the 7 realms of being. So here dvipe means in each island, he created. So the misconception of this verse would be that, see, by creating these separate continents, he created separate zones for things to live in. But it's clarified here. Within each island, within each world, he used things. He actually caused things, caused or used Sarit rivers, Giri hills, mountains, and Vana forests, Adi, etc., things like that, natural features, to create Sima. Sima means borders. For Bhuta Nivrityai, so that people could rest. Basically, it means for the happiness of the rest of the people. So in other words, people are struggling. Who lives where? That's the nature of this world. We're dependent on it. We need it. It's not natural. We don't naturally own it. So we keep fighting about who gets what. So what he did as the emperor of the world was he said, look, let's make it clear. This part of the world is over here. That part is over there. So we'll have mountains that form a line. And we'll have this river come down. I'm going to use that river and these mountains and this forest. That's a border. See, the stuff that's inside that, that's yours. The stuff that's over there, that's theirs. That's what he did. That's one of the big things that he did. So the concept of national borders originated from Priyavrata. And the final statement, which is actually the most important statement. Bhaumam divyam manushyam cha mahitvam karma yogajam yash chakre nirayaupamyam purushanujana priya purushanujana. He's not Purusha, he's not the supreme, he's Purushanujana. That's what I was talking about before. Okay, so the translation, a beloved follower of the Supreme Person, he considered the glories of the nethers, the heavens, and the human world to be the same as getting nothing, for they all require work and practice. That's his realization, and this is important. You remember Brahma told Priyavrata when he was trying to get him to come out of meditation and do something in the world, he told him, when you do something in the world, you'll gain something that you won't get from meditation. You'll gain important realization that you won't get from just sitting here and not doing anything. What will you get from trying to be active in the world? You'll get this realization. Basically, the realization is that everything takes a lot of work and nothing comes for free. Therefore, since nothing comes for free, everything is basically equal. If I buy a cherry, I have to spend $1.50. So I feel like I'm happy that I got a cherry, but I had to work and sweat to get the $1.50 to get the cherry. So actually, I had to subtract in order to get a plus. Plus and subtract together equals 0. That's what you realize when you actually try to do things in the world. And that is an important realization, because until you realize that, until you experience it, until you taste it, our intense thirst for things doesn't slacken. But once you realize that, it slackens. Yeah, sure, I'd love to have that, but it's a lot of work to get, and it's a lot of work to keep. That thing, the more glorious the thing, the more work and effort it's going to be to maintain it and get it. So you won't get anything except what equal to what you give. It's an important, a very important realization. So you'll never profit. So that's why it says, Bomam divyam manusham cha mahitvam. That mahitva means all of the wealth, all of the enjoyment, all of the glorious stuff that you can get in the world. 3 types of world. The manushya lok, which means the earth world, the human world. Manush, human, manush, the human world. Divya lok, the world of the gods, the celestials, the heavens. All of the pleasure, all of the mahitva, all the wealth, pleasure, great stuff you can get there too. And bhaumam, the stuff that's below the earth. In the netherworld where the sub-god, not sub-gods, but like opposite gods live. The Nagas, the dragons, the serpents, all of their wealth, all of their enjoyment. All of that stuff is karma yoga ja, produced by either karma or yoga or some combination of the two. This means you have to work for stuff in the manusya lok, in human world. You have to do karma. You have to work for stuff to get stuff in this world. For stuff in heaven or it's not hell actually, but for stuff in the superior heavens or the underground subterranean heavens, subterrestrial heavens, you have to work, but not conventional work, but yoga. You have to do mystical work. So whether it's conventional work or mystical work, it's work to get any of this stuff. So what is it? Opamyam. It all comes out equal in the end. Niraya. Niraya. There's no profit. There's no profit to come here. Aya means profit. Yes, chakre. To make that stuff gives you no profit. That's what he realized. All right, any questions? What are the glories of the nethers? Just look up Nagaloka. Look up my video on YouTube about Aslesha. So all actions are in vain, at zero-sum game. It's a zero-sum game. But this goes back to the question that Flatlander had. It's a zero-sum game if you're measuring the score in terms of objects and perceptions. But if you're measuring the score in terms of the evolution of your consciousness, then it's not a zero-sum game. If you do yoga and karma with dharma, if you do your responsibilities, if you use the world as a chance to learn how to exist in community rather than in solitude, where you function as a servant to the whole rather than you wanting the whole to be your servant, then you've gained great profit. Not in your bank balance or how cool you look, in terms of how happy, peaceful you can actually feel. So the world is actually a zero-sum game, but the player can gain experiences from that are not zero-sum. So also the world is a zero-sum game because it's a world of perception, but there's another realm which can be perceived. Consciousness can try to perceive consciousness. If consciousness tries to perceive consciousness, then it becomes engaged in effortless perception without work or stress. So in order to participate in that existence where there's effortless coexistence, one has to work out all of one's quirks by participating in this world where the world itself is not the objective, but it's the effect that the world has on us which is the objective. Thanks, Bardo. Flatlander says, but it takes work to free yourself also. That's correct, but it's not zero-sum work. You should put in the work for something that will actually give you benefit. Ayush Kansal says, is Priyavrata karma avatar? No, Priyavrata is a Shakti Vesh avatar. That's what I tried to make clear. Okay, guys? Any other questions? So, yeah, that's the end of the first chapter. And after this, that's it for Priyavrata. There's no more stuff about Priyavrata. Kind of unfortunately, I kind of like Priyavrata. I wanted to hear more about him. It kind of went out with a bang. I mean, this was really good stuff. This statement right here is one of my. Dick. Aho asadvanushtam yad abhiniveshoham indriya ravidya rashta vishama vishayanda kupe tadalama musha vanitaya vinodam rigam mam digiti garyam chakara. Is really kind of fed up. All right, guys. There's no statement about what happens to him, but it was previously because that was previously explained. He achieved perfection. Okay, so go back and read the beginning of the 5th canto and you'll hear about that. All right, guys, thank you very much for joining me for Bhagavatam today. I'm going to get onto working on the probable new report that I'll be offering. And so I'm not going to be doing the other videos this week because I'll be spending time trying to develop that report and seeing how it works out. Yudhishthira, you want to read Mahabharata? Or go back to first canto of the Bhagavatam stream. Namaste.